Michael David Dunn is charged with the murder and attempted murder in the November 23rd shooting at Jacksonville, Florida gas station. The 45-year-old Dunn parked beside the sport utility vehicle occupied by Davis and 3 other young men and told them to turn the music down, police said. Dunn exchanged words with Davis, who was in the back seat, and started firing. He later told the police he felt threatened. His attorney has said Dunn saw a gun and shot in self-defense, perhaps laying the groundwork for the case under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. See, here we go with that Stand Your Ground law. Since the shooting, Davis's family has received an outpouring of support from the community. A, quote, Justice for Jordan, unquote, Facebook page has been set up, and classmates have gathered a memorial service with T-shirts showing Davis's smiling face. Fire trucks saluting him by spraying water over the airplane carrying his body to Atlanta while it was on the runway. The teen's mother lives near Marietta, and the funeral is scheduled for Davis Saturday in Trinity Chapel Church of God in Powder Springs. Davis's father, Ron, says his son was the typical high school junior who was getting ready to start his first job at McDonald's, looking forward to buy his first car and turning 18 the next year. He had $1 million smile and liked listening to mostly rap, but also the sounds of his dad's generation, including James Brown and The Temptations. Standing over his son's casket, Ron Davis promised to fight laws that allow people to carry guns outside of their homes. Quote, law enforcement should be the only ones who should have guns on the street, unquote, he said. Quote, that's what's killing our kids more than anything, unquote. Police said that they did not find a weapon in the SUV with the young men, and Ron Davis has said that he doesn't believe Dunn's claim that he saw a gun. He thinks Dunn is searching for an explanation. Quote, they were just 17-year-old kids that were having a good time coming from the mall, he said. So, we have to talk, people. And I'm just going to, we really have to really start looking at these issues, and this is a senseless death. This is somebody's child that has not even began to live life. And we really need to start questioning guns and gun control in these issues. We need to have a really honest dialogue about this. And, I don't know if anybody has anything to say about this story, but it really bothers me. And the story hasn't really caught on yet. I don't think. I just heard about the story myself. And it's really troubling that this same incident similar incident has happened down in Florida again. So, Paula 664, do you have something to say about this comment? We're going to go through these real quick. If we go over, we can still record this, but I just wanted to get your comments because we're going to do another part of the show later on this week. So I had a couple more stories I wanted to do.
Yes, I do. First of all, it is very unfortunate that something like this has happened, but I think over the years, the excuse has always been that an individual feels threatened, especially when they are in the presence of an African-American person, period. And I also believe that a lot of times, when we look at the Second Amendment when it comes to the right to bear arms, people go buck wild, and they feel as if, they have a right to go ahead and defend themselves amongst African-American people. And I just don't understand. And another issue that I have is that it has actually extended from slavery. It has come all the way down, from where African Americans have been mistreated just because of the color of their skin. So because this individual was around African American people or in the presence of African American kids, he wants to say that he felt threatened. And the unfortunate part is that the child didn't even have a gun. So I don't even understand how this individual feels threatened. That is the issue that I'm having.
So let me ask you this: do you think that when we see the images and we hear about African American and youth in media, do you think that kind of already has people on edge, or do people have like a preset notion that they're going to be harmed? Especially if the kids were just being kids themselves. Do you think that the media and the images that we have seen and lack of positive images that we have seen in the media, do you think that has contributed to these deaths, especially with the Trayvon Martin case and this case here and other cases that we hear that are similar to these?
Absolutely, yes. I think what happens is that a stereotype will set in, and, they will say that because one African-American person has done this some years ago, then they want to bring the stereotype down throughout the years and say that all African-American children or teens or adults are like this. And especially the media, they will throw out so many misconceptions about African-American people to where it will cause people to actually be afraid. But I think that the media, really does have a lot to do that, because they will throw in facts that are so untrue. But I really believe, when it all boils down, it has a lot to do with the stereotypes that has been set amongst African-American people for absolutely no reason.
Does anybody else have a comment? They want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'm going to jump in.
Okay, go ahead, JR.
All right. Now, it's an unfortunate thing, what happened. It's ignorant to say racial stereotyping don't happen, As a Hispanic myself, I know it greatly, But here's the thing. It ain't the media's fault for the stereotypes. They're throwing out the stereotype, yes, but us as individuals have got the choice to accept that stereotype or think as our own. So, the fear of any minority, whether it's whether you're in a Hispanic neighborhood or whether you're in an American neighborhood or whether you're in a white neighborhood or an Arab neighborhood, all comes from within. It may have been posed by media or social settings or what so, but, again, it's our own choice whether to be afraid or not. There was a time, there's time when, say, the Italian mob, people were afraid of them. Now there's no mob, There was a time when the Colombians were the bad guys. Did you ever meet a Colombian you was afraid of? I haven't. So I'm not saying that because I'm a Billy Bad Tail or whatever. I'm saying that because I accept people for who they are. I give the respect that's given to me. And that's what it comes down to, When people choose to accept a stereotype, they're no better than that stereotype.
But do you think that people sometimes, because when we look at the media, like the media is two-edged sword. We get a lot of our information, like the dissemination of information. We get a lot of things that we don't, we get our information as far as weather. We get our information what's going on in local politics, government, national politics, international news or whatever. And it's kind of hard for you to differentiate the fact versus fiction sometimes. And then on top of that, if you are, if you haven't been exposed to a lot of minorities, or you haven't been exposed to, like, you're not really a cultured person, and you're only, I don't know, you see this news segment on something negative that one African-American done or one minority done, you probably take that and run with it and think that most of them are like that. Do you think that that's probably the issue sometimes where people they have lack of education and lack of experience of dealing with other types of people when they see this stuff in the media and they run with it? Do you think that's a problem?
See, that's where I'm going with it. Lack of education. Lack of experience. There was a time when I was the only...
What it is, let's call it ignorance.
What's that?
Say, Michael?
It is what it is. Call it ignorance.
Yeah, exactly right. There was a time when I was the only minority in the town I lived in. In the entire county, I was the only Hispanic. There was an all-German county back then. But you know what? It happened. People change. Did it make me stronger throughout my experiences in life? Of course it did. But it's all on how I chose to deal with it. I could have very easily gone the drug dealer route. I could have very easily gone, it's all racial route. I could have very easily done any of that. But you know what? I tightened up my belt. I took a few licks, and here I am today. Now nobody can shut me up. But it's a mix of a bunch of things. It isn't just the media. The media, as in like news organizations, reporting only on minority crimes and this and that. No, it's also a mix of our TV shows, reality TV, cops. Just the reason all the drunks they find are, what would be claimed as white trash, and there's a reason that all the drug dealers that they would find are minorities.
And let me jump in here real quick, because you just brought up something really, really good. Because these reality shows, let me tell y'all something. Let me tell you something. This is my point where I'm gonna start preaching. Let me tell y'all something. These reality shows are not healthy at all. Okay, let me speak for a minute now, and we're gonna wrap things up. But my thing is, these reality shows are not healthy. Like, for example, when you see these people fighting, like, don't get me wrong, I like watching some of these shows, but you see like Bad Girls Club, you see Real Housewives of Atlanta, or you see Basketball Wives, a.k.a. Basketball Hoes. Or you see Miss Honey Boo Boo Child getting on screen, exploiting herself in her community, in her family, and exploiting herself, and the parents just think that that's the most cutest thing in the world. We have to start looking at these things because, sure, everybody complains about these reality shows being, they exploit the communities that, that they represent. But to me, like, as long as we keep supporting these shows and we keep watching them, it's going to continue. And then the stereotypes that these shows have, like you see Basketball Wives, it just portrays African-American women as all as loud, gold-digging friends that are ghetto and ready to fight at a drop of a hat.
Well, on the flip side, Seneca, there is another reality show like Survivor, which has portrayed some African Americans that were very respectable and won, like Earl or Vesefia. They won $1 million. They are African American men and women. Or Sandra, who was a Puerto Rican woman who won Survivor. There are at least a couple reality shows that are depicting minorities, American minorities, in a very respectable light.
Yeah, but see, that's one. Speaking of Survivor, the Survivor, Hispanic. So, I'm comparing apples to oranges here. But, it's like over here at Park. They've got a random drawing. They say it's a random drawing for a choice parking spot every single week, okay? This has been going on for 2 years. There have been people that have gotten a parking spot 4 and 5 times, okay? I have got a 1 in 35 chance on getting that spot. I am the only person to have never gotten it. I don't think my name's up, to be honest with you. You know? But, you know, here's the thing. I never made any excuses. I'm a self-made man just like my dad was.
Exactly. That's how I am.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, no excuses. I've never had anything handed down to me, nor do I expect anything ever handed down to kids. You know, I brought my kids up to be like, you deal with it on your own. Be a man. Now, you know, with these reality shows and all these things, drama is what gets ratings, and ratings is what brings money.
I'm not going to argue with that.
Yeah, people look at that John and Kate plus 8. They exploited their kids for 13 seasons. You know, the last season they were the highest paid reality show per episode in history before the divorce happened. You know, they were making over $8 million an episode. The cast of Friends was making $6.5 million per episode at their peak. But see, once again, people they give us an idea. This media, whether it's TV or radio or dang papers. They give us an idea of what beauty is supposed to be. People magazine has got 100 most beautiful people issue, in which out of the top 100, 10 may be minorities. You see what I'm saying?
Hey, let me jump in here real quick.
Can I get back
hold that thought, JR. Brad, you have anything else? Because I know you're probably busy, and I just wanted you to see if you had anything else to say. But we're going to probably continue this conversation because, if you still want to call in at 646-915-8200. We're about to go off air, but we're going to continue talking because it's going to continue recording, but it just won't be on air. But it will be, I will put the rest of this online. And we got 657 back on, so thank you for that. Brad, do you have anything else that you want to really say, or are you just listening at this point? We want to thank you for coming on today.
Sure. My last follow-up, and I'd be glad to continue this conversation in another show. I think it's very productive. I just encourage people to look at third parties, to stop supporting the two-party system. Even though election's over today, politics doesn't end in this country. Find a third-party voice that represents you or the closest to your views as possible, and support them. Vote for their candidates. Stop supporting the legacy two parties and start forcing change in this country. Be active, be involved.
Let's go for Parliament.
Yeah, I'm not against that actually. Things like people calling this radio show is an absolutely fantastic thing. I think you're doing a great job, Seneca, just to have a different perspective and voice out there. So I will sign off. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to talking to everyone again in the near future.
All right, thank you.
Take care. Have a nice day or nice evening.
We're going to continue this dialogue. We're just going to not be streaming, but it's still going to be recording, and we will put it up on at a different time. So,
Seneca, I've got something I want to throw out there.
Okay, go ahead.
As far as this shooting and the stand your ground and how people view race through the lens of the media, I want to ask some of the other people that are on the line here what you think people that are contributing to the media, how they are affecting this. Let's say, for example, you've got gangsta rappers, creating their art form and releasing their music and whatnot. Obviously, their art form is influenced by their experiences in their life, their culture, and whatnot, and they put those experiences into the art that they're creating, and then throw that out there, and then that gets interpreted by the public, and different people interpret that differently.
Okay.
How do you think that is maybe affecting, for example, in this situation when this young man was murdered by another man, through either way, maybe for, as he says, he feels he was threatened because they were listening to loud music, whatever that loud music was, whether it was the Temptations or Lil Wayne or whatever. Do our performers, people creating this art, do they have any responsibilities to try and maybe moderate how they are sending their messages out? I mean,
okay, I have a couple things to say on that. Then, like you said, I want everybody else to comment. But here's my thing: parents need to start being parents. Stop letting the TV be your child's role model. Stop letting the TV babysit your child and mentor your child. If you can't differentiate the difference between entertainment and reality, then there's something wrong with you. Because one thing about it is, a lot of these people, they are not even living that lifestyle, first and foremost. Okay, let's get that straight. Most of these rappers that are singing all about this stuff, they ain't living that lifestyle. Now, some of them are now, but let me tell you.
Some of them are. You know, like I see.
Yeah, and the thing about it, yes, they do need to take responsibility of that somewhat, but then again, it has to go back to the parents. The parents are the ones that should be the role models. Am I right?
Oh, I agree that the parents do need to, teach their children the difference between fact and fiction. They also have to, if they see their child admiring or idolizing a certain performer, find out, is this performer someone who's real, or is this someone that's just pretending?
And my thing is,
some of these performers, they have actually real stuff to talk about, and they're talking about from their real life, and they have, maybe they have a real message there, and they're actually saying something different than what the child is perceiving, and that child needs help understanding what the performer is actually saying.
Yeah, and here's what I'll say too: why is it always put on the rap community? Why isn't it? Why, when we talk about people need to clean up their image, why is it like the actors and actresses, they can put out any form of any whatever out here, and they're not held accountable? But when it comes to the rappers or the hip hop community, they are always being pinned with it. You see what I'm saying? Like, I don't.
Well, there's definitely other performers. Let's take music, since we're talking about or you're mentioning rap. Let's talk about other musicians. You've got rock and roll stars who sing about and glamorize heroin and whatever. There's, I don't know. The Rolling Stones have sung some songs about heroin, and look at that song. Have the parent teach their kid, this is what this song is about. This is why you need to stay away from heroin. Don't listen to the song and think, oh, this is a cool thing, and I'll be cool like Keith Richards.
Now let me add this real quick. Okay. There's one slight misconception, and that's that art, whether it's rap, whether it's rock, whether it's poetry, whether it's, painting, is self-interpretation. 10 people could listen or look at the same thing, and you'll have 10 different interpretations. It's all on how the person is brought up. And going back to my brother's point there, it is based on the parents. Now, it wasn't that long ago that the Supreme Court heard a case of the man Judas Priest over the subliminal satanic messages supposedly within their music. That was back in 1986, I believe. that the U.S. Supreme Court took the time to listen to a case about subliminal messages about suicide within the music, because they never took into account that maybe the parents weren't giving that child enough attention.
Mm-hmm.
They never took into account that maybe that child was fighting some hidden demons within drug use or what's else. All they did was held the band accountable. And they ended up having to pay a
and
very...
it's so easy to make everybody else the scapegoat. You know,
Exactly.
It's so easy to point fingers instead of looking and doing a self-evaluation. It's so easy to do that. We live in a society that we tend to do that.
Yep. And I know some of us here remember the whole U.S. Supreme Court versus Two Live Crew, the whole freedom of speech within music trial that ended up bringing in our very famous and yet used parental advisory warnings within CDs that may be a little bit of mature within its lyrics. But once again, what never got taken into account were the parents allowing underage children to listen to this type of music. Because
that reminds me of an interview I saw back in the 80s. I was watching the Today Show when Jane Pauley was on the Today Show. She had Frank Zappa as a guest, and she asked Frank Zappa something about, oh, you've raised your children drug-free and your children are very healthy and everything. How is it that a rock star can raise perfectly healthy children? And Frank Zappa was livid. He was so upset. He was like, what are you talking about?
Now, if you remember, and I don't know, sir, how old are you?
42.
How old are you?
42.
Okay. There was a time when the likes of Elvis Presley was held as taboo. You know?
I know, Elvis the Pelvis.
That's right. You know, and there was a time when the hip movements, not just of Elvis, but, of Frankie Robinson, it was all held taboo. But once again, the people fail and refuse to accept accountability on all this. And that's where the problem falls in. It's not on the musicians. The musician's job is to make music. Sell records.
Exactly.
And
honestly, the stuff that they talking about is adult content. Just like you have people that are, like, I hate to use this analogy, but just like adult videos. Those for adults. No child should have access to it anyway. So why would you even have that discussion?
Yep. And people just need to sit back, relax, start taking accountability on themselves. But it's much easier to point the finger at the other person. Oh, no, it shouldn't have been me. I did everything for that child. I did this. I did that. Look, my stepson is a piece of shit.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, I do apologize, but...
Well, we keep it real on this show, so
I brought him up the right way. He chose his own path.
Mm-hmm.
And he will reap the consequences of his own action. When it comes down to it, and he's all of a sudden, facing the judgment, and he looks up to me for help. Too late for me to help you. I gave you all the things you needed. You chose to turn the other way. I'm ready to roll. Yeah. So, yeah,
You know, I think one thing that I've noticed here that all these situations have in common is whether it's a gun that kills someone, whether it's a car that kills someone, whether it's the music that drives a person to kill someone or suicide, or the drug addiction. In every case scenario, the common denominator is somewhere there's an idiot involved.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a human factor.
Yeah, that's right.
That human factor gets to be screwed up. There's a myriad of reasons and whys out there. But blaming the music, blaming the gun, blaming the person, no, they're blaming the wrong things. Common denominator in all of it is still a human factor.
A human factor, always. 664, do you have something to say? I know you've been sitting there pretty quiet. Are you just listening?
Yes, I am yeah, but I really do want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think when it all boils down, we look at rap music being associated with violence, and then violence being associated with African Americans. And when it all boils down and you tie it all together, that is, why I truly believe that a lot of people, will become offended because they truly assume that all African Americans are violent just because they listen to certain music. And I agree with one thing that Seneca said. All people or all African Americans that listen to rap music do not associate themselves with their lifestyle. And so I think that, what happened in this case is that this man, really assumed that just because this young man was playing the music, he assumed that the young man was violent. And not having a gun on him, not having anything on him, he just assumed by that music, that the young man was violent.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe I didn't voice it correctly, but some of these musicians, they are creating their music from their own experiences. Some hip-hop artists, some punk rock musicians, some country musicians, whatever, whatever kind of music you're making, you are creating it from your own experience. Some people just like the style. They don't have the experience, but they love the style, and so they imitate it. But I think that gets all mashed together and confused by the mass media. So some people that see this in the media, they misinterpret it. You got person A who actually lives the lifestyle and is creating their music or their art or whatever based on their lifestyle, and then you got B who does not live that lifestyle but likes that style of art and is imitating it or creating it. I don't know. Am I getting myself confused here? Either way, it's no excuse for someone else to just assume because some other person is listening to, let's say, country music. Let's just assume, they're just some drunken, whiskey-swilling, female-bashing redneck from Texas just because they're listening to Johnny Cash or whatever.
I'm glad you brought that up because I've got a story here that I'd like to submit into this, and this is a total flip side thing. Seneca knows that I tend to be rather outspoken on some things. You don't have to usually wait too long to ask me what I think because I usually tell you. And one of the things, like I myself, I am a I am a Caucasian male that lives in southern Indiana, and I am a gay man. And I live in Republican redneck heaven. Now, if I am parked at a stoplight and there is a vehicle next to me that is blaring the hardcore, twangy country music, I'm pretty outspoken. I'm pretty much the type that I'll tell you what I think. But do you think that me, fitting the demographic that I am going to roll my window down and tell that redneck to turn his music down? Hell no. I ain't going to do it. I'm going to keep my mouth shut and think, you know what, the light's going to change. I'm going to roll on down the road here. I ain't going to square off with a redneck. You know, not happening. You know, so opposite sides of the spectrum there? No. Just, you know, if you thought that there was a situation, if you thought you were going to get yourself into a situation that could potentially be violent to you, why did you even open your mouth in the first place? Leave.
Ooh, that's a good point. Very good point. Very good point. But once again, you know, that point is validated on the assumption of a stereotype.
That's true.
You know?
That's true.
It's for example, if you were to look at my MP3 player, okay, and you know,
I've seen your MP3 player. We discussed a couple of items in that MP3 player, JR.
Yeah.
I'm not going to put you on blast, though. I ain't going to put you on blast.
But,
yeah, if you looked at what's in my CD player, you'd think I'm German.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Hispanic and listen to all kinds of music, you know? As long as I can find a point of relation to it. It don't matter.
Right.
I've got some grass, I've got some country, I've got some rap, I've got some, you know, techno, I've got some rock, you know? But music to me is enjoyment. It's art. That's exactly all it is, you know?
Right.
Just like I can go to a museum and enjoy the works of art of many different artists. Some people like Van Gogh's, other people like Monet, you know? Me,
Right.
I enjoy the expressions that I get from looking at that art. I enjoy my own interpretation, you know? And that people have been drawn away from being independent thinkers to have been told, hey, you got to start thinking this about this, or you got to start thinking this.
So
I
think the point that we're trying to get at is that we, as a society, we are letting certain stereotypes define how we are going to
How we should conduct ourselves.
Will not conduct ourselves, how we are going to interact with other members of our same society, just because, as in this example, you got two cars parked next to each other, and one of those cars is a couple of teenagers playing some loud rap music or hip-hop, and you got another guy in another car that objects to that music, and for whatever reason he doesn't like that music. He opens his fat mouth and tells him to shut up, you know, turn it down, and he sees, oh, black people, shoot first, ask questions later.
Sure, we've become a sheeple, you know?
Oh, and, you know, and in response to that, and I guess I should have clarified this as well, when I gave my little example there of me here in the sticks and, you know, I roll up on something like that, I'm not going to engage something in that situation. Another little part to that is I am a gun owner. I am a licensed gun owner.
Yeah, what's the point? Why even bother?
Exactly.
Like
why
you
would
said, you're going to roll down the road.
Yeah.
You don't have to listen to that 24/7.
Yeah, the lights change, and when the light changes, you can either slow down and let them pass you, or you can just go on and get away from it.
Yeah,
It'll
you can
be
just
all
roll
right.
up your window and turn up your radio even louder so you can't hear them. So what? Big deal.
And
30 seconds, you'll be away.
To the person. You made the choice. Did you hear me?
No, I don't think so. I was too much background.
I'm sorry. I said that all eventually comes down to the choice that the person makes, individual decisions. You know, sometimes we make the right choices, sometimes we make the wrong choices. And that's the game that we call life, my friends.
Can I point out also that something that just occurred to me? Maybe this guy had something happen to him in the past that made him go ballistic.
No.
To react proactively. Maybe for some reason, maybe at some point in the past, I'm not trying to defend this person, but maybe there was something that happened to him that makes him feel defensive and pull the gun first. And like I said, I'm not trying to defend him. I'm not trying to say. I'm not trying to throw the onus onto anyone else. But maybe there's something that we don't know about that made him act that way, act so offensively.
But this is what I'm saying. I hear what you're saying, but what I'm saying is, if you are to that point to where you are willing to take another person's life, and you got issues that you're dealing with that are that extensive, then you need to go get some help. Something's wrong with you. Especially when you are about to take somebody's life and they don't even have a gun to defend themselves with.
Well, like I said, I'm not trying to defend that person. I'm not trying to defend his actions or anything like that, but maybe there's something that we don't know about that...
But see, even at that point, though, it's still no excuse. For example, me having been a U.S. Marine, okay, I have been in close encounter combat, okay? Now, I can't go into the specifics of that, but I am a licensed gun carrier in this state, but I don't carry a gun anymore because it is a reaction of me. If I ever point that gun, I am going to shoot. You see what I'm saying? So I took my own responsibility on that and ended up selling my guns. I still got my knives, but I ended up selling my guns in order to, avoid that liability. It's all a personal choice.
Right, a choice of responsibility.
Right. Well,
exactly.
Yeah,
I'm not going to argue that. I'm sorry, man.
What did you say, 657? Go ahead.
Oh.
657.
Yes, you know what? Yes, and you know what? And it really was a personal choice. But the question that I have too is, would he have pulled out the gun and shot that young man if he was anything other than African American? Would he have done that?
Well, that's what I'm asking. Also, I'm wondering if maybe there's
and that's a question that probably we will never know the answer to.
Right. No. That was just a question that I threw out there. But I think that when it all boils down, there was hatred. There was some type of hatred because a person is not going to just pull out a gun and just shoot somebody.
That was pure hatred.
There was hatred.
That was hate.
I don't even think that the music was an issue. I don't think the music was an issue. I think the color was an issue. And I'm just going to be real about it. I think the color was an issue. And I truly believe that when you when you have hatred like that towards a race, that is something that is learned. That isn't something that you're just born with. That is something that is learned, and he was either taught to be that way, or just like somebody else has said that was just one of his personal feelings or whatever about African Americans. But fact of the matter is, I truly believe that it had nothing to do with the music. It had everything to do with the color.
And that could very well have been the case. Me and Seneca have had plenty of conversations over different, racial, very racist, inhumane actions throughout the country. For example, back in 2002, in the state of Mississippi, all right, 30 miles east of Jackson, Mississippi, there's a little town there. I cannot remember the name of it to save my life. But there was a teenage boy of African-American descent who was drugged 35 miles in the back of a pickup by a couple of white you know, and 35 miles. Now, these guys got exactly what was coming to, you know, but the district attorney went after them with federal and state charges, you know, and they are on death row. But here's the thing. And you know, the guys admitted they only did it because the guy was African American. Not exactly in them words, I'm sure, but you know, it maybe this guy is out of his mind racist. Maybe he's just insane. Maybe he just ended up getting a clap from some prostitute that night. He was just mad, you know. You know, maybe his check didn't get the time. We'll never know what the reason was. Maybe there was just no reason. Maybe he was just one wrong thing away from going postal because he hated his job. And instead of going postal at his job, he took it out on this kid, you know?
Yeah,
but
maybe, exactly. We could never know what it was. Maybe he was drunk and was upset about something and just this loud music. I don't know. It's hard for us to say, but either way, we can agree that this guy did something wrong, that this should never have happened.
He should be facing the harshest punishment allowable by law, you know? And
speaking of law, I think it's time that, you know, you would have thought that Florida would have learned its lesson and changed up and gotten rid of some of this castle law doctrine.
Yeah, the defense.
Indiana has a castle law doctrine, but it only applies to in your own home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I want to say this, that, you know, it is true, you know, that he probably was facing something or, you know, he maybe have lost his job or whatever. But if something like that did happen, he would not have used the excuse that he felt threatened. You know, you're not going to sit out here and be all upset because you lost your job and pull out a gun and shoot somebody and say that you were threatened.
Well, ma'am, if he hadn't had a gun, he wouldn't have used it. If he had not had a gun, he would have used his fists and would have done it like a real man.
Absolutely. Maybe we don't know. Maybe he would have had a shank next to him, you know?
Right.
And once again, it's self-accountability. Maybe the guy's out of his wits. Regardless of which, he should be locked up for the rest of his life. This is a child that we'll never know if he would have been the next Nobel Prize winner, you know, or the next great heart surgeon, or would have discovered the cure for cancer or AIDS. Or then again, there's a child that might have gone the exact opposite direction.
But still, life is a life. A life is a life. If you can't give life, you ain't got no right to take it.
Absolutely right.